the MGC7 is a really light and fast cube, which is the main advantage. So doing some research, the MGC7 is actually a bit heavier than the Spark, but it's just a slight difference, and due to it being a bigger cube and mass divided by volume gives you density, MGC7 just feels less dense overall, and in addition it's not as tight as the Spark, so it really just gives off a feeling of a lighter and faster feel. And comparing with my main cube, the Outfu, I would say that the MGC is also slightly faster. So the Outfu has a very low friction and its turning is extremely smooth, but it's also a denser and heavier cube, which is the main disadvantage to it. And it adds more inertia to each turn, while on the MGC, although the friction is just slightly higher than the Outfu, like the friction level is still at the low end compared to most 7x7s, and like with its low mass and low inertia, it just outweighs the Outfu's slightly lower friction level and allows the MGC to claim the crown of the fastest 7x7 on the market. And with such a low effort required in its turning, it's easy to just go fast and go light on this cube. You also can do a larger number of solves before you actually tire out. So some reviews that I've watched have pointed out that the MGC7 has similarities with the Outfu, which I personally feel that they are not all that similar. So while the MGC7 is also just another smooth and low friction cube, it does have elements of the Spark mixed into its feel. So the Outfu basically just feels like two flat faces that have been spammed with lubrical silk. I personally do like this feel a lot, but the MGC on the other hand, it offers something different, which I would say this is a really subjective personal preference thing, so there's really no better and worse in this category, it's just what you like. I find that similar to how I would describe a Spark, it just feels a little bit sandier and you can feel the pieces a bit more. Another common point with the Spark is that it does have a stronger spring force than the Outfu, especially on the outer layers, and it generally gives the outer layers a more stable feel than what the Outfu has to offer. And in addition to speed, the MGC also boasts a near top level performance in its corner cutting and stability. The forward corner cutting can go up to like 2 QBs, and it feels almost as stable as a ESL V1 when I corner cut like so much. And the reason why I keep mentioning the ESL V1 is because that was the cube that really made stability and corner cutting come together. It also implemented a stockless center design, which when I talk about the mech of the MGC7, you will also see more about that. And on its inner layers, the MGC can also cut basically like one full piece almost everywhere again. It's also one of the only two 7x7s who can 1x2 corner cut more than a full piece. So the only other cube who can do that is the Outfu, and the best it can do is about 1.2 pieces for the 1x2 cuts, while the MGC can go up to about 1.4. I've tried doing that on the Spark and it deformed. Reverse corner cutting on the MGC is mostly passable. It cuts about half, at least half everywhere. But I do think the Outfu does a slightly better job with reverse corner cutting, especially on the outermost cut and the 1x2 and 1x3 cut. It basically just cuts a bigger angle with less effort, and I feel that these areas are where you actually, when you solve bars and you insert them into the top layer with this kind of moves, you really need these points a little bit more. So I think that will be a slight advantage to the Outfu. And then for the size, the MGC is exactly the same size as the Outfu. Both of them are 68, which is 1mm bigger than the Haze, which is 67, and 1.5mm bigger than the Spark, which is 66.5. And I do think 67 is actually the best size, but especially with like more younger cubers in the cubing scene compared to the past, I do think 66.5 will become the more popular size. And lastly, the MGC7 also makes a lower pitch sound than most other cubes. The MGC7 sound does remind me of a Shadow, and it's quite satisfying to listen to. The MGC7 has one of the most interesting mechanisms I've seen in a 7x7. So due to how 7x7 pieces are smaller than they are on a 5x5, like in the MGC5 they could actually totally do away with the center stock and have the entire spring to be housed in this upper section, but on the MGC7 that's not possible because the available area to house the spring is smaller, so that YJ went with a half stock to house like the other part of the spring, so the spring is actually within this height. Especially on the outermost layer and the second layer, the pieces actually dig really far in underneath the core. The MGC7 anchors are huge. It's really a lot bigger. And this allows the outer layer and the second layer to be a bit more stable. They made the double anchor hollow. Usually the bottom one will be hollow and the top one is filled up, like for most of the cubes out there. In a few special cases, including the spark and the haze, it's also hollow, just like how it is on the MGC. Piece construction is a bit different. The MGC5 also did this, but because the MGC5 is completely stockless instead of a half stock, like both anchors of the MGC5 are cast in 3x3 torpedo style, whereas in the MGC7 it's just the inner anchor. The outer one is cast in the normal stickerless style. Okay, so one thing about the MGC7 that disappointed me is the lack of anti-deforming mech. Between the second and third layer, all you see is this really long straight line. There's really more things you can do with this space here rather than just blatantly extending it out. If you compare that with the outful, which the MGC6 also did this, they used this extra space to put this extension here. Despite that, I would still describe the MGC as a nearly impossible cube to deform thanks to the very large feet of the 2x2 pieces. Because of the large feet, this piece will have really limited room to slide around, and yeah, I don't deform this cube that easily anyway. There's one other piece type, which is the 2x3 piece, which still has shallow roots and it's quite prone to popping. The one thing about the outful mech is it's more than just an anti-deforming mech. It gives the second and third layer more area to interlock, and it produces a really solid cube that doesn't want to flex. Even if I hold one layer just like that and I can spam elks. Whereas on the MGC, if I were to hold this outer layer, like the 5 middle will actually wobble a bit more. Obviously, this is not a realistic way to judge how the cube performs in the soft, because you won't hold on to just 2 layers and turn the rest, you will hold more, but I do find that the inners of the MGC really do flex a little bit more than the outful, and like if you want to combine this with the fact that the MGC's corners are actually bigger deep inside the cube, and plus like similar to the spark, it has a bit more spring force than the outful. The MGC outer layers are a lot more stable and they are better than the outful. Whereas for the outful, I find that the inners are generally more stable and a bit better than the MGC, and plus the reverse corner cut better. So better outers, better inners. So generally I would say the MGC7 would be the best 7x7 for most people. Like the main advantage is just how light it is. Include the price, it's actually 2 steps ahead of the rest of the other cubes, because like at just 66% the price of the outful or 55% the price of the sparks is also quite worth it. If you were to ask me what 7x7 to get, definitely the MGC, but regarding what I would use for myself, the outful is going to continue being my main, because I average about 327 on both, so there really isn't a point in me like permanently trying to buy and own this cube if I average like the same on both of them. Plus, I think that my use of Yao on 7x7 might actually contribute to some additional bias towards the outful, because like, especially when I'm trying to protect a cross, and usually I do red cross, so I have a 3/4 red cross on the side, and like I will try to do a lot of like slice move, especially after I build the middle bar and like, I have a cross to protect, and then I would generally slice a little bit more on the left as well, and my usage of inner layers are a bit heavier, so like how I said, the outful has better inners and the MGC has better outers. I do think my solving style does favour better inners, but still if I had to pick a second cube after the outful, I would definitely take the MGC before taking Haze as my third choice and Spark as my fourth.